Hello everyone, kindly hit the subscribe button on your screen and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The moment she placed the prescription on the counter, something felt off. 37 years as a pharmacist teaches you to trust that instinct. The paper trembled in her weathered hands and her eyes, pale blue and clouded with cataracts, refused to meet mine. The prescription was for oxycodone, 30 mg, high dose, high street value, and the third one she'd brought in this month. Mrs. Abernathy, I said, keeping my voice professional despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. I'll need to verify this with your doctor. She clutched her purse tighter, knuckles whitening. But Dr. Reynolds always, he said it would be ready. My back, I can't stand much longer, dear. I'm Alex Chen, head pharmacist at Wellcare Pharmacy in the quiet town of Millfield. At 32, I was younger than most in my position, which meant I constantly had to prove myself. Today would test everything I thought I knew about my profession and about human nature itself. The line behind Mrs. Abernathy grew. Tuesday mornings were always busy, filled with elderly patients collecting their weekly medications. My technician, Zoe, shot me a look that said, "Handle this quickly." I'm sorry, but our records show you filled a similar prescription just 10 days ago. I turned my monitor so she could see. That should have lasted 30 days. Her face crumpled. No, that can't be right. I've been taking them exactly as prescribed. I'd seen this before. Elderly patients sometimes became confused with their medications, or worse, had them stolen by family members or caregivers. But something else nagged at me. The prescription looked different. The signature wasn't quite right. Mrs. Abernathy, I need to see your ID, please. The pharmacy fell quiet. Even the automated blood pressure machine in the corner seemed to hold its breath. My ID, but you know me, Alex. I've been coming here for years. She was right. Elena Abernathy, 78, widow, lived 3 blocks from the pharmacy in a small blue house with immaculate flower beds. I delivered medications to her home during the pandemic. She baked cookies for the staff every Christmas. It's just procedure, I said, softening my tone, for controlled substances. Her hands shook more violently as she opened her purse. The customers behind her began to shift impatiently. I could feel my assistant pharmacist, Diane, watching from the inventory shelves, her judgment radiating across the room. Diane had wanted my position for years. Is there a problem? A man's voice boomed from the back of the line. Some of us have places to be. Mrs. Abernathy dropped her purse. Its contents scattered across the floor, lipstick, tissues, pill bottles, and a small leather wallet. Her face flushed with embarrassment as she struggled to bend down. I've got it, I said, coming around the counter to help. As I gathered her belongings, I noticed something unusual about one of the pill bottles. The label had been partially peeled away. When I handed back her purse, our eyes met. Something passed between us, a flicker of fear in hers, a spark of suspicion in mine. Your ID, I prompted gently. She handed me her wallet with a defeated sigh. I opened it, expecting to see her familiar face on her driver's license. Instead, I found myself staring at the ID of someone I'd never seen before. The name read Elena Abernathy, but the birth date and address were different. The photo showed a woman with similar white hair but sharper features. My blood ran cold. This isn't you. The pharmacy went silent. Mrs. Abernathy, or whoever she was, stared at me with those pale blue eyes now brimming with tears. I can explain, she whispered. But before she could say another word, Diane was at my side. I'm calling security, she said firmly, and the police. Wait, I started to say, but Mrs. Abernathy's face had drained of all color. She swayed on her feet. Please, she begged, her voice barely audible. You don't understand what's happening. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the silent alarm button beneath the counter. In pharmacy school, they teach you about drug seekers, prescription forgers, and the opioid crisis that has ravaged communities like ours. They teach you to be vigilant, to protect public health, to follow protocol. But they never teach you what to do when a sweet old woman you've known for years suddenly isn't who you thought she was. As security approached from the front of the store, Mrs. Abernathy reached into her pocket and pulled out another ID. Her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped it. "This is my real license," she said, her voice breaking. "Please look at it before they take me away." I accepted the second license, expecting to find more deception, but what I saw made my heart stop. The photo matched the woman standing before me, but the name wasn't Elena Abernathy. And the birth date made her much, much older than she appeared. Diane was already explaining the situation to the security guard. I had seconds to decide what to do: follow protocol, report prescription fraud, and potentially send this elderly woman to jail, or listen to what appeared to be an impossible explanation. I slipped both IDs into my pocket and made the decision that would change everything. "There's been a misunderstanding," I told the security guard. "Mrs. Abernathy is a regular customer. I'll handle this." The guard looked skeptical but nodded and returned to his post. The line of customers continued to stare. "Come with me," I said quietly to Mrs. Abernathy, leading her to our consultation room. "You have 5 minutes to explain why you're using a false identity to obtain prescription narcotics." She sank into the chair, her shoulders curving forward with the weight of whatever secret she carried. "It all started 60 years ago," she began, "when I made a promise that I never imagined would follow me into old age." I closed the consultation room door, shutting out the curious stares of my coworkers and customers, having no idea that what I was about to hear would shake the foundations of everything I believed about identity, devotion, and the lengths one might go to honor a deathbed promise. The consultation room felt smaller than usual, its beige walls closing in as Mrs. Abernathy, or whoever she truly was, gathered herself. The fluorescent light emphasized every line on her face, every tremor in her hands. Outside, I could hear Diane explaining to customers that there would be a delay. Her voice carried disapproval. "My real name is Catherine Winters," the elderly woman finally said. "Elena Abernathy was my sister-in-law." I checked the ID she'd handed me. Catherine Winters, born 1938, making her 88 years old, 10 years older than Elena Abernathy should have been. "I don't understand," I said. "The Elena Abernathy I know has been coming to this pharmacy for years." Catherine's eyes filled with tears, "Because I've been living as Elena for the past 7 years." She reached into her purse and pulled out a faded photograph. Two young women smiled at the camera, arms linked, standing before a 1950s Chevrolet. Both had the same shade of blonde hair, similar height and build. "That's me on the left and Elena on the right. We were both 19. "You were twins?" I asked, studying the remarkable resemblance. "No, just looked alike. Elena married my brother Robert in 1958. She traced the outline of the other woman's face with a gnarled finger. "She was my best friend, more like a sister than an in-law." I glanced at my watch. The morning rush wouldn't wait much longer, and Diane would soon have reason to interrupt us. "This doesn't explain the forged prescriptions, Catherine." Her face hardened. "I've never forged a prescription in my life. Dr. Reynolds writes them for Elena Abernathy because that's who my medical records say I am." "But why? Insurance fraud is a serious—" "It's not about money." The outburst surprised us both. She lowered her voice. "It's about a promise I made." Outside the consultation room, I could hear Diane's voice growing louder, fielding questions from impatient customers. We didn't have much time. 7 years ago, Elena was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, Catherine continued. She had 3 months to live, at most. Robert had passed years before, and their only son died in Afghanistan in 2010. She had no one left except me. I felt the first stirring of understanding, though the full picture remained elusive. "Elena was worried about her house," Catherine said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's been in the Abernathy family for generations. She wanted it to go to her granddaughter, Lily, who was overseas with the Peace Corps. But Lily was estranged from her father before he died. Elena changed her will." But she was afraid that without someone maintaining the property until Lily returned, the city would condemn it, or worse, Robert's cousins would challenge the will. So moved in after she died? Catherine shook her head. Elena asked me to become her just until Lily returned. Take my house, my name, my life, she said, just until Lily comes home. I promised her I would. I sat back, stunned. You've been pretending to be a dead woman for 7 years. I didn't think it would be this long. Lily kept extending her service. Then she met someone, got married abroad. Her voice trailed off. I've written to her as Elena. She thinks her grandmother is still alive. But the medications, the oxycodone. Catherine's face crumpled in pain. My back. I have degenerative disc disease. It's gotten worse this past year. I see Dr. Reynolds as Elena because I have her Medicare, her insurance. I have nothing in my name anymore. I gave up my apartment, my identity. Catherine Winters technically hasn't seen a doctor in 7 years. I tried to process this incredible story. The prescription today is legitimate, but last week someone broke into the house. They took my medication, among other things. Her eyes met mine, desperate. I couldn't report it to the police. What if they started asking questions? I'm not Elena Abernathy. The weight of her confession hung in the air between us. An elderly woman living in a kind of self-imposed witness protection, all to honor a deathbed promise to her best friend. Catherine, I said gently, what you're doing is illegal. Identity theft, insurance fraud. Don't you think I know that? She interrupted, voice cracking. I wake up every morning in Elena's bed, look at Elena's photographs on the wall, water Elena's garden. I haven't been myself in so long I sometimes forget who Catherine was. A knock on the door made us both jump. Diane's voice came through. Alex, we have 15 people waiting. Is everything all right? 1 minute, I called back, then lowered my voice. I need to think about this. Catherine reached across the table and gripped my hand with surprising strength. Please, I'm not a criminal. I'm just an old woman keeping a promise. Lily sent a letter last month. She's finally coming home in December. Just a few more months, and Catherine Winters can reappear. Elena can finally die properly. Her desperation was palpable, her story both outlandish and strangely believable. In all my years as a pharmacist, I'd never encountered anything like this. The medication, she pleaded. I need it. The pain keeps me up at night. I stood, mind racing. Wait here. Outside, the pharmacy was in chaos. Diane approached immediately. What's going on? Do I need to call the police? No, I said firmly. It's a misunderstanding. Her doctor confirmed the prescription by phone. Diane's eyes narrowed. I didn't hear the phone ring. I used my cell, personal favor from Dr. Reynolds. The lie felt strange on my tongue. In 15 years as a pharmacist, I'd never broken protocol like this. I moved quickly behind the counter, filled the prescription for oxycodone, and documented it in the system under Elena Abernathy's name. Each keystroke felt like crossing a line I'd sworn never to cross. When I returned to the consultation room, Catherine looked up with hope in her rheumy eyes. I'm giving you a 2-week supply, I said, keeping my voice professional despite the turmoil inside. After that, we'll need a new prescription from Dr. Reynolds in your real name. She stared at me, but how? I'll help you figure this out, Catherine, but not like this, not with forged identities and Medicare fraud. There has to be another way to keep your promise to Elena. Her lower lip trembled. You don't understand what it means to give up your life for someone else. As she tucked the medication into her purse, I noticed a fresh bruise on her wrist, partially hidden by her sleeve. Catherine, when you said someone broke in and stole your medication, did they hurt you? She quickly pulled down her sleeve. It doesn't matter. It does matter. Are you safe in that house? She stood shakily, leaning on her cane. For 60 years, I've kept every promise I ever made to Elena Abernathy. I'm not stopping now, especially not when. She trailed off, glancing nervously over her shoulder. When what? Catherine hesitated at the door. When I think the person who broke in wasn't a stranger. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I think it was someone who knows Elena should be dead. Before I could respond, she slipped out, merging with the crowd of waiting customers. I watched her small, hunched figure navigate through the automatic doors and into the bright morning sunlight, carrying secrets heavier than the prescription in her purse. I had just aided and abetted fraud. I'd broken my professional oath. And somehow, I knew this was only the beginning of what Catherine Winters would ask of me. That night I couldn't sleep. Catherine's story haunted me, the identity swap, the deathbed promise, the mysterious break-in. I tossed and turned, my pharmacist's oath battling with the image of an elderly woman living in fear, all to honor a decades-long friendship. By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed to see where Elena Abernathy lived. My shift ended at 3. The small blue house was exactly as I remembered from my pandemic deliveries, neat garden beds lining the walkway, wind chimes tinkling from the porch. But now I noticed details I'd overlooked before. A security camera discreetly mounted by the door, new deadbolts, curtains drawn despite the pleasant afternoon. I knocked, unsure what I'd say if she answered. After a minute of silence, I tried again. "Catherine," I called softly, "it's Alex from the pharmacy." The door opened a crack, chain still engaged. One pale blue eye peered out. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I'm worried about you. Can I come in?" Hesitation, then the sound of the chain sliding free. The door opened wider, revealing Catherine in a floral housecoat, her white hair loose around her shoulders. She looked older without her careful Elena disguise. "5 minutes," she said, "then you leave." The interior was a time capsule, floral wallpaper, doilies on armrests, photographs everywhere. Catherine moved carefully to an armchair, her gait betraying the back pain she'd described. "The medication is working," she said before I could ask. "Thank you." "Catherine, you mentioned someone might know Elena is dead. Who?" She fidgeted with the edge of her housecoat. "Robert's nephew, James. He always resented that the house would go to Lily instead of him." "Have you seen him recently?" 3 days ago, he was parked across the street watching the house. Her voice dropped. "He never liked Elena when she was alive. Now he visits monthly, bringing groceries I don't need, offering to help with house repairs." She leaned forward. "He's waiting for her to die so he can challenge the will." "But Elena is already dead," I said carefully. "Not legally. I've been cashing her social security checks, voting in her name, paying her taxes." She looked down at her hands. "If the truth comes out, I could go to prison, and James would contest the will before Lily returns." I glanced at the photographs on the mantel, Elena and Catherine in their youth, side by side at birthdays, holidays, graduations, identical pearl necklaces at their throats. In the center stood a more recent photo of a young woman with Elena's eyes. "Is that Lily?" Catherine nodded, her face softening. "Taken before she left for Africa. She's 32 now." She picked up the frame, fingers tracing the glass. "Elena practically raised her after her father deployed. Then they had that terrible fight when Lily decided to join the Peace Corps instead of taking the corporate job her father had arranged before his death." She set the photo down carefully. "Elena regretted their estrangement every day until she died. And Lily has no idea her grandmother passed away. I write her letters in Elena's handwriting, email sometimes. It's not hard. Elena and I even had similar handwriting." Her eyes met mine, defiant. "Judge me if you want, but I made a promise." Before I could respond, headlights swept across the curtained windows. A car door slammed outside. Catherine's face drained of color. "It's James. You need to leave." "I can't just." Out the back door, quickly. She was already pushing me toward the kitchen. "He can't find you here. He's suspicious enough already." Through the kitchen window, I glimpsed a tall man in his 50s approaching the front door, carrying a paper bag of groceries. His resemblance to the man in the family photos was unmistakable. "Catherine, if you're afraid of him." "What I'm afraid of is breaking my promise. Now go." I slipped out the back door as the doorbell rang. Instead of leaving, I circled to the side of the house, conscience battling professional ethics. Eavesdropping was wrong, but leaving a potentially vulnerable woman alone with someone she feared felt worse. Through the slightly open living room window, their voices carried clearly. "Aunt Alina, you're looking well today." James's voice was butter smooth. "James, this isn't a good time. I was about to lie down. I brought your favorites, those almond cookies from Hiller's Bakery, and more of that special tea for your arthritis." "Thank you, but I noticed your garden needs attention. Those roses are looking ragged. I could come by this weekend, take care of it for you." "The gardener comes tomorrow." A pause. "You don't have a gardener, Aunt Alina." My pulse quickened. Catherine was slipping, making mistakes. "I just hired one, that nice Donaldson boy from down the street." "The Donaldsons moved away last year," James said, his voice hardening. "Are you feeling all right? Perhaps it's time we discussed assisted living. This house is too much for someone your age to manage alone." "I'm perfectly fine." Catherine's voice took on Alina's familiar stubborn tone. "And I'm not going anywhere until Lily comes home." Lily, James almost spat the name. 7 years with barely a visit, some granddaughter. "She writes, she calls when she can." "When was the last time you actually spoke to her?" Another dangerous pause. I found myself holding my breath. "Last month," Catherine said finally. "She's coming home in December." "Is she? That's what you said last Christmas, and the Christmas before that." James's voice dropped to a tone that raised the hair on my arms. "You know what I think, Aunt Alina? I think Lily has forgotten all about you and this house." "Please leave, James. I need to rest." "Of course, but first, I noticed something strange. I ran into Dr. Reynolds at the golf club yesterday, asked him how you were doing, and he said he hadn't seen you in months." My blood went cold. Catherine had claimed Dr. Reynolds wrote her prescriptions. "He's mistaken," Catherine said, but her voice wavered. "I saw him just last week." "Did you?" Footsteps crossed the room. "Because I have a friend at the insurance company. Your Medicare hasn't been billed for an office visit in over 6 months. Yet somehow, you're still getting prescriptions." Silence, then Catherine's voice, stronger now. "Are you spying on me, James?" "I'm concerned. A woman your age, living alone, possibly confused. It would be irresponsible not to keep an eye on things." "I want you to leave." "I'll go, but I'm calling Adult Protective Services tomorrow. It's for your own good, Aunt Alina, or should I say," his voice dropped to a whisper I strained to hear, "Catherine." The sound of breaking glass made me jump, then Catherine's cry of pain. I didn't think twice. I burst through the front door to find James standing over Catherine, who had fallen against the coffee table. Blood trickled from a cut on her temple where she'd struck the corner. "Who the hell are you?" James demanded. "Her pharmacist," I said, moving to Catherine's side, "and I think you should leave, now." James's face darkened, but he backed toward the door. "This isn't over. She needs help, professional help. That woman is not who she claims to be." After he left, I helped Catherine to the couch and examined her cut. "It's not deep, but we should clean it." She caught my wrist. "He knows, Alex. Somehow he knows I'm not Alina." "We should call the police." "And tell them what? That I've been impersonating a dead woman for 7 years, committing fraud." Her eyes filled with tears. "He'll have me declared incompetent. Take the house before Lily returns." I cleaned her wound in silence, mind racing. Everything in my training said to report this situation. Insurance fraud, identity theft, potential elder abuse. Yet as I looked at Catherine, this woman who had sacrificed her own identity to honor her friend's final wish, I couldn't bring myself to make that call. "Catherine," I said finally, "I think it's time to contact Lily directly." Her face paled. "I can't. The truth would break her heart." "And what happens when she arrives in December, expecting to find her grandmother alive?" Catherine looked away. "I've thought about that every day for 7 years." The silence stretched between us, filled with impossible choices. Then my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "I know what you're doing. Meet me tomorrow at Riverside Park, 10 a.m. Come alone, or I go to the police about both of you. I showed it to Catherine, whose hands began to tremble. James, she whispered. I don't think so, I said slowly. He would have confronted me here. Then who? I stared at the message, the pit in my stomach deepening. Someone else who knows Alina's secret, and now mine too. Morning fog shrouded Riverside Park, transforming the familiar landscape into something otherworldly. I arrived 20 minutes early, scanning empty benches and deserted walking paths. My breath clouded in the autumn chill as anxiety tightened my chest. Who knew about Catherine and Alina, who had been watching us? I'd barely slept after leaving Catherine's house the night before. I'd insisted she lock every door and window, and I'd almost called out of work to stay with her. But she'd refused, saying she'd handled worse situations in her long life. Just because I'm old doesn't mean I'm helpless, she'd said, steel in her voice. At 9:55, a figure emerged from the mist. A woman in her 30s, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing hospital scrubs beneath a light jacket. My heart stopped. I recognized her instantly. Diane, I said as my assistant pharmacist approached, you sent that text. She sat beside me, her expression grim. I followed you yesterday. I saw you enter Mrs. Abernathy's house, then hide when that man arrived. She met my eyes directly. I heard everything through the window, just like you did. The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. How long have you known? I've suspected something was off for months. Mrs. Abernathy's prescriptions changed dramatically last year, different handwriting on some forms, inconsistencies in her medical history. Diane looked out over the misty river. Then I overheard your conversation in the consultation room. I was restocking the cabinet next door. I closed my eyes briefly. The consultation room shared a thin wall with our storage area. Catherine's confession had likely been audible to anyone working there. Are you going to report us? I asked. Diane didn't answer immediately. That depends. On what? On whether what you're doing is actually protecting her. She turned to face me fully. Alex, I've been in pharmacy longer than you've been alive. I've seen every kind of fraud and abuse, but I've also seen the healthcare system fail the elderly in spectacular ways. A jogger passed, briefly visible through the fog before disappearing again. You should have come to me directly, I said, anger rising, not with anonymous threats. Would you have told me the truth, or would you have protected your license at all costs? Diane's voice was bitter. We both know the answer. She was right, and we both knew it. What do you want? I asked. I want to know if you're being played. Elderly fraud is common, Alex. Catherine could be manipulating you. I shook my head. You didn't see her face when James confronted her. The fear was real. James Abernathy has a reputation in this town, Diane acknowledged. 3 failed businesses, gambling debts. He's exactly the type to pressure a vulnerable elder for inheritance. So you believe Catherine's story? I believe she believes it, Diane hesitated, but there's something you need to see. She pulled out her phone and opened her email, then handed it to me. The message showed a staff newsletter from Millfield Memorial Hospital dated 5 years ago. The headline read, Nurse Catherine Winters celebrates 40 years of service. Below was a photo of Catherine, unmistakably the same woman now living as Alina, receiving a plaque from the hospital administrator. Catherine didn't give up her identity when Alina died 7 years ago, Diane said quietly. She was still working as a nurse 2 years after that. I stared at the evidence, mind racing. She lied about when she started living as Alina. Or she lied about everything. Diane took her phone back. Have you verified anything she told you? Have you seen Alina's death certificate? Spoken to anyone who attended the funeral? Asked why there was no obituary in the town paper? Each question hit like a physical blow. I hadn't verified anything. I'd taken Catherine's emotional story at face value. What are you suggesting? I asked, though I already knew. Maybe Alina isn't dead. Maybe Catherine has been impersonating her for reasons we don't understand. Maybe there's no deathbed promise at all. The possibility made me physically ill. Had I been completely naive? Had my sympathy for a seemingly vulnerable elderly woman clouded my professional judgment? Why would she do that? Money, the house, who knows? Diane's expression softened slightly, but there's one way to find out. How? I have a friend in hospital records. I can find out if Alina Abernathy died at Millfield Memorial. If she didn't, we check neighboring hospitals. I nodded slowly, trying to process this new reality. And if you find proof she died, then we figure out why Catherine lied about when she took over Alina's identity. Diane stood, and we need to decide what to do about Lily. You think she's real? I know she is. Diane pulled out her phone again and showed me a social media profile. Lily Abernathy, 32, Field Director for International Aid Alliance, currently stationed in rural Ethiopia. According to her latest post, she's returning to the States in December for her grandmother Alina's 80th birthday. I felt the blood drain from my face. Catherine said Lily thinks her grandmother is still alive. She does, and she's about to fly halfway across the world to see her. Diane's eyes hardened. So either Catherine is planning an elaborate confession or she's going to somehow continue the charade in person. Either way, Lily deserves the truth. Just then my phone rang, Catherine's number. I answered immediately. Alex, her voice was breathless with panic. Someone broke in again last night. They took Alina's jewelry, her personal papers, everything that proves who she was. Are you hurt? I asked, signaling to Diane that something was wrong. No, but there's something else. Catherine's voice dropped to a whisper. They left a note on Alina's bed. It said, I know she's dead. Time's up, Catherine. My eyes met Diane's. I'm coming over, don't touch anything. As I hung up, Diane was already grabbing her keys. I'm coming with you. Why would you help? I asked, suspicious after her revelations. Because regardless of what Catherine has or hasn't lied about, she's still an elderly woman in danger. Diane started walking toward the parking lot. And because if anyone's going to report you for professional misconduct, it should be after we know the whole truth. As we hurried through the thinning fog, the weight of what we were stepping into pressed down on me. Catherine had lied, that much was now clear. But why? And was she truly in danger, or was this another manipulation? Most importantly, who had left that note? James was the obvious suspect, but something about the situation felt wrong. If he knew Alina was dead, why not go straight to the authorities? Unless he had something to hide as well. Catherine's front door stood ajar when we arrived, a red flag that made me reach for my phone. Diane placed a restraining hand on my arm. Let's see what we're dealing with first, she whispered. The interior of the house had been transformed since my visit yesterday. Drawers emptied onto floors, cushions slashed, framed photos smashed. The systematic destruction went beyond burglary. This was someone searching for something specific. Catherine, I called out, stepping carefully over scattered papers. She emerged from the back bedroom, her small frame dwarfed by an oversized cardigan. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hair, usually carefully styled to mimic Alina's, hung limply around her face. You brought her, Catherine said, noticing Diane. Her voice held no surprise, only resignation. She knows everything, I confirmed, and she says you lied about when you started living as Alina. The hospital newsletter shows you working as Catherine Winters 5 years ago. Catherine sank into the only upright chair remaining in the living room. Yes, I lied about that. Why? Diane asked, her professional demeanor firmly in place. Because the truth is more complicated. Catherine gestured to the destruction around us and apparently more dangerous. I took a seat on an overturned footstool. Tell us everything, the real story this time. Catherine's eyes closed briefly, gathering strength. When she opened them, the vulnerability I'd seen before was gone, replaced by a clear, steady gaze. Alina didn't die 7 years ago, she began. She was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, but she responded to treatment. She lived another 4 years after diagnosis. So she died 3 years ago, I clarified. In a manner of speaking, Catherine's hands twisted in her lap. Elena knew the cancer would return eventually. She worried constantly about the house, about Lily's inheritance. James had already tried contesting the will once, claiming Elena was mentally incompetent. That tracks with what I know of him, Diane murmured. When Elena's cancer returned, she made a decision. Catherine's voice strengthened. She asked me to help her disappear. The silence that followed was absolute. Disappear, I finally managed. You mean? Elena Abernathy didn't die in a hospital bed. She flew to Switzerland for assisted suicide. Diane gasped softly, euthanasia. Catherine nodded. She didn't want a prolonged death, didn't want to give James the chance to take control of her affairs while she was incapacitated, so we created a plan. She reached for a torn photograph on the floor, the two young women from the 1950s. Because we looked so much alike, even in our 70s, we thought I could become her when necessary, for public appearances, doctor's visits, anything that would establish she was still alive and well. But that's not what happened, I said. No, after Switzerland, I was supposed to maintain the fiction for a year at most, then announce Elena's death from natural causes, with the will already executed and uncontestable. Catherine looked around the destroyed room, but Lily kept extending her time abroad. Elena had changed her will to require Lily's physical presence to take ownership of the house. She wanted to ensure Lily would actually return, not just sell it from overseas. So you stayed as Elena for 3 years, Diane said, her tone now thoughtful rather than accusatory. I lived in my apartment most of the time, came here regularly to maintain the house, collected Elena's mail, kept up appearances. Catherine gestured to the ransacked desk. All of Elena's end-of-life documentation was in there, her Swiss clinic paperwork, the letter she wrote to Lily explaining everything. And now it's gone, I said, understanding dawning. Whoever took it knows Elena chose to end her life, Catherine finished, which is still controversial in many circles, but more importantly, they know I helped arrange it and then perpetuated a fraud afterward. Diane moved to the window, peering through the curtains. You think it's James? Who else would benefit from exposing me? Catherine asked. If I'm discredited or arrested, the house goes into probate. With Elena's paperwork missing, her death becomes mysterious, suspicious even. The will could be tied up for years. Just long enough for Lily to give up and return overseas, I said, following the logic, and for James to make a claim as next of kin. A car door slammed outside. Catherine tensed. It's a police cruiser, Diane reported from the window. Catherine's face went ashen. He's reported the break-in. It's starting. As knocking commenced at the front door, I made a split-second decision. Diane, stall them. Catherine, grab whatever you need. We're leaving. What? Both women asked simultaneously. If James is behind this, we need proof before the police get involved. I helped Catherine to her feet, and we need to warn Lily today. Diane looked skeptical, but moved toward the door as the knocking grew more insistent. What exactly is your plan? Elena Abernathy has one more appointment to keep, I said, getting Catherine toward the back door. And Catherine Winters is going to come back from the dead. 20 minutes later, we sat in my car 2 blocks away, watching police cars gather outside the Blue House. Catherine clutched a small bag containing her medications, both IDs, and a worn leather address book. We need to find Elena's paperwork, she said, her voice steadier now that we were in motion. Without it, I have no proof of what really happened. First, we need to contact Lily, I insisted, pulling away from the curb. She needs to know her grandmother is gone before she flies halfway around the world. Catherine's shoulders slumped. I've dreaded this moment for years. I've been writing to her as Elena, sending birthday cards, Christmas presents. Why didn't you just tell her the truth after Elena died? Diane asked from the back seat. Because Elena's letter explained everything better than I ever could. Her decision, her reasons, her love for Lily. Catherine stared out the window at the passing town, and because Elena made me promise to deliver it in person. Look her in the eyes, she said, so she knows I wasn't afraid at the end. As we drove, my mind raced. Where would James have hidden the stolen documents? Who else might know about Alina's choice? And how could we prove any of this without the paperwork? There's one person who might help us, Catherine said suddenly. Dr. Helen Park. She was Alina's oncologist. She knew about Switzerland, helped with the medical referrals. Would she confirm that? I asked. Wouldn't that put her medical license at risk? Helen retired last year, moved to Arizona. Catherine frowned, but she might have kept records. She and Alina were friends for 30 years. I can try to access Alina's medical records, Diane offered. As a pharmacy professional, I could claim we need to verify medication history. I nodded, formulating a plan. We'll split up. Diane, try the medical angle. I'll take Catherine somewhere safe, then look into James's background. There must be a financial trail if he's that desperate for the house. As we approached the outskirts of town, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered on speakerphone. Alex Chen, a woman's voice, unfamiliar, with international static on the line. Speaking. This is Lily Abernathy. I just received a very strange email claiming to be from my grandmother's pharmacist. It said to call this number immediately. Catherine gasped. I hadn't sent any email. Ms. Abernathy, I said carefully, I am your grandmother's pharmacist, but I didn't email you. Then how do you explain this? Her voice hardened. The email says my grandmother died 3 years ago, and someone has been impersonating her ever since. It says I need to come home immediately if I want to save my inheritance. Catherine's face drained of color. James, she whispered. Ms. Abernathy, I said, trying to sound professional despite my racing heart. This is complicated, but... Is my grandmother alive or not? Lily demanded. Before I could answer, Catherine reached for the phone. Lily, it's me, Catherine Winters, your grandmother's friend. Her voice broke. We need to talk about Alina. There was silence on the line. Then, I'm on the next flight to Boston, and whoever is responsible for this sick game better be prepared for consequences. The call disconnected. Catherine handed back my phone, her hand trembling. She'll be here in less than 24 hours, I said quietly. And so will the truth, Catherine replied, staring at the horizon, whether we're ready or not. Just then, Diane's phone chimed with a text. She read it, her expression changing from confusion to shock. What is it? I asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. It's from my contact at the hospital records department. Diane looked up, her face pale. She says there is no death certificate for Alina Abernathy, not here, not in any hospital in the state. Of course not, Catherine said. She died in Switzerland. That's not all, Diane continued, her voice unsteady. She says there's a patient named Alina Abernathy currently admitted to the long-term care facility at Millfield Memorial, admitted 3 years ago, still alive. The long-term care facility occupied the east wing of Millfield Memorial Hospital, its entrance softened by planters filled with chrysanthemums. Catherine moved beside me like a sleepwalker, her face unreadable as we approached the reception desk. After Diane's revelation, we debated our next move for hours. Catherine had initially refused to believe Alina could be alive, insisting she had witnessed her death in Switzerland, but doubt had crept in as she recounted the details. I wasn't in the room for the actual procedure, she'd admitted. Alina wanted privacy in her final moments. The doctor came out afterward and told me she was gone. I never saw her body. There was a cremation, but her voice had faltered. I received the ashes by mail a week later. Now, as the receptionist directed us to room 307, I watched Catherine's composure fracture. Her hand trembled on my arm. I can't, she whispered. You need to know, I said gently. We all do. The elevator ride felt eternal. When the doors opened on the 3rd floor, Diane was waiting, having arrived earlier to verify the patient's identity through her hospital connections. It's her, Diane confirmed, her professional demeanor unable to mask her bewilderment. Alina Abernathy, admitted 3 years ago with advanced pancreatic cancer and severe dementia. Dementia, Catherine's voice was barely audible. According to her chart, she has limited lucidity and doesn't recognize visitors. Diane hesitated. Her medical proxy is listed as James Abernathy. A nurse approached, clipboard in hand. "Are you here for Mrs. Abernathy?" Catherine straightened her shoulders. "Yes, I'm her sister-in-law." "She's having a good day," the nurse said warmly. "Just don't expect too much. She drifts in and out." Room 307 was painted a pale yellow, with a single hospital bed by the window. In it lay a small figure, white hair fanned across the pillow, face turned toward the autumn light. Catherine froze in the doorway. "That's not Alina," she said immediately. "That's not her." I moved closer to the bed, studying the elderly woman's features. She resembled the photos I'd seen in Catherine's home, but something was different, the shape of her nose, perhaps, or the set of her jaw. The woman's eyes fluttered open, pale blue, clouded with cataracts. Her gaze wandered the room before settling on Catherine. "Katie," she whispered, voice raspy from disuse, "you came back." Catherine's legs gave way. I caught her as she sank to the floor, her eyes fixed on the woman in the bed. "Margaret," Catherine's voice broke on the name. "Margaret Ross." A smile trembled on the woman's lips. "You remember me, after all these years." Diane helped me guide Catherine to a chair beside the bed. "Who is Margaret Ross?" she asked. "Elena's cousin," Catherine answered, her face ashen. "They could have been twins. She disappeared decades ago after a nervous breakdown. The family never spoke of her." Margaret's frail hand reached for Catherine's. "Elena found me in that awful place upstate." Her words slurred slightly, "said she'd get me out, give me a new life." Understanding dawned on me. She wasn't planning assisted suicide. No, Catherine's eyes filled with tears. She was planning to disappear, to switch places with Margaret. "The perfect plan," came a voice from the doorway. James Abernathy stood there, his tall frame blocking the exit. Aunt Elena was always clever. Catherine rose unsteadily. "You knew." "Not at first." James entered the room, closing the door behind him. "I thought Aunt Elena had simply died and you were impersonating her, keeping the house from its rightful owner, me." "The house belongs to Lily," Catherine said firmly. "A technicality I planned to challenge." James moved to Margaret's bedside. "But then I discovered the truth. Elena didn't die, she became someone else entirely." My mind raced, piecing together the fragments. Elena took Margaret's identity. She's living as Margaret Ross somewhere. "Switzerland," Catherine whispered, the final piece clicking into place. "She went to Switzerland as herself, then returned as Margaret. I helped her without realizing it. I thought I was arranging her peaceful death, but I was facilitating her escape." Her voice hardened as she faced James. "But you found out." "When I visited Elena at the house, I noticed inconsistencies. Small things at first, preferences that had changed, memories that were confused, then bigger things." He smiled coldly. "I hired a private investigator who found Margaret here, admitted under Elena's name." "Why the break-ins?" I asked. "Why steal the documents?" "Because they prove fraud," James replied. "Insurance fraud, identity theft, falsifying medical records, crimes committed by both Elena and Catherine." "To protect Lily's inheritance," Catherine said defiantly. "To avoid Elena's debts," James corrected. "Debts I discovered were owed to me, loans I made to her years ago, conveniently forgotten in her will." His eyes narrowed. "I want what's mine, the house, the insurance policies, all of it." "You won't get away with this," Diane said, reaching for her phone. James held up a hand. "I already have. The police are waiting to arrest Catherine for fraud. They're also very interested in a certain pharmacist who filled illegal prescriptions." My heart sank. My career, my freedom, both potentially over. "Unless," James continued smoothly, "we reach an agreement. Catherine signs the house over to me as Elena's proxy, admits to identity fraud, but keeps silent about Elena's disappearance and serves minimal time. You, Mr. Chen, lose your license but avoid criminal charges." Before anyone could respond, the door burst open. A young woman stood there, tall, tanned, with Alina's determined chin and fierce eyes. "Lily," Catherine breathed. "I took an emergency flight," Lily said, surveying the room with mounting confusion. "Now someone tell me what's happening. Where is my grandmother?" The next hour passed in a blur of explanations, tears, and revelations. Lily produced emails from Alina, dating back years. Emails we now knew came from the real Alina, living as Margaret in Switzerland. "She never told me she was sick," Lily said, showing us the most recent message on her phone, "just that she had something important to tell me when I came home." As Lily absorbed the truth about her grandmother's deception, a text arrived on my phone from a Swiss number. "Tell Lily I'm coming home. It's time for Margaret Ross to die and Alina Abernathy to face her family. I should have done this years ago." I showed the message to Catherine, whose expression transformed into one of profound relief. "She's alive," she whispered. "My best friend is alive." James left in handcuffs an hour later, arrested not for uncovering the identity switch, but for the financial elder abuse we discovered in Margaret/Alina's medical records. He had been draining the real Margaret's accounts for years while serving as her medical proxy, which explained his desperate need to keep control of the situation. As for me, I faced a disciplinary hearing but kept my license, thanks to testimony from Diane and the Hospital Ethics Board about the extraordinary circumstances. Catherine Winters officially returned to Millfield after a long absence caring for family overseas. She moved into the Blue House as herself, serving as caretaker until the real Alina returned 2 weeks later. On my final visit before Alina's arrival, Catherine sat with me on the porch swing, autumn leaves drifting around us. "Was it worth it?" I asked, "all those years living someone else's life?" She considered the question, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "I spent 7 years being Alina, and before that 60 years being her friend. Sometimes I'm not sure where she ends and I begin." She smiled, the afternoon light catching the silver in her hair. "But I kept my promise, not the one I thought I made, to let her die with dignity, but the one that mattered more, to ensure that when she was ready, she would have a home and a family to return to." I thought about identity then, how we build it, lose it, sometimes borrow it, how our promises define us as much as our names do. "You're a good friend, Catherine Winters," I said. "So are you, Alex Chen," she patted my hand. "So are you." As I drove away from the Blue House for the last time, I realized that some prescriptions can't be filled from behind a pharmacy counter. Some healing comes from keeping faith with those we love, even when the path forward isn't clear. And sometimes, the most important identity we can claim is simply that of a person who keeps their promises. Thank you so much for joining me on this emotional journey. I hope you enjoyed this story of identity, sacrifice, and the profound bonds that connect us. If this story touched you, please subscribe for more tales that explore the depths of human connection and the extraordinary lengths we go for those we love. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.